You've seen the movie. Tom Cruise dies on a battlefield, wakes up yesterday, and gets another shot at survival. Edge of Tomorrow sold millions on the fantasy that death could reset time to a fixed earlier point. That's a myth. The reality is, time loops aren't just impractical, they're physically impossible. The movie ignores three fundamental laws of physics: entropy, causality, and energy conservation. But there's one in particular that acts as a physical one-way sign for the entire universe. If this law didn't exist, your morning coffee would never get cold. But you also wouldn't exist to drink it. We're going to break down the 5 biggest physics violations in that movie, starting with this universal law of no return. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy, disorder, always increases in a closed system. That's the arrow of time. You can scramble an egg, but you can't unscramble it. You can shatter a glass, but the pieces won't leap back together. Time moves forward because the universe moves from order to disorder. There's no rewind button. The movie asks us to believe in a perfect reset, that the heat of an explosion, the smell of ozone, and the specific trajectory of every grain of sand on that beach snaps back to a save state. That would require reversing entropy for an entire planet. But entropy is a physical scar on the universe. You can't just wipe away the heat and disorder of a battlefield any more than you can unburn a forest. The problem is, reversing entropy isn't just hard, it's physically impossible at macroscopic scales. Let's use the unshattering glass analogy. When a glass breaks, the shards scatter. The sound waves disperse, heat dissipates. To reverse that, you'd need to reverse the trajectory of every single molecule involved in the break. You'd need to reverse the motion of air molecules, the vibrations in the floor, the photons that bounced off the glass. You'd need to account for quantum uncertainty, the fact that particles don't have perfectly defined positions and velocities. Even if you could reverse the paths of trillions of particles, quantum mechanics guarantees that tiny fluctuations would prevent you from achieving identical initial conditions. That brings us to chaos theory. Even the smallest variation in starting conditions, one electron in a different quantum state, one air molecule moving slightly faster, creates massive divergence over time. The movie implies that each loop plays out the same way until the protagonist changes his actions. That's not how physics works. Each loop would diverge immediately. Quantum fluctuations alone ensure that no two runs would ever be identical, even if you did nothing differently. The truth is, entropy doesn't care about narrative convenience. The universe has no mechanism to store a save state and reload it. Every process that increases entropy, every chemical reaction, every bit of heat transfer, every photon that scatters, would need to reverse simultaneously. The energy required to do that is astronomical, which brings us to the next problem. But even if you could somehow reverse entropy, you'd hit an even bigger problem: the energy required to manipulate spacetime itself. The movie treats time control like a biological superpower. But let's stop talking about theory and look at the price tag. Because when you calculate the actual energy debt of warping spacetime, the Omega isn't just an advanced alien. It would need to be a walking supernova. To understand why, we have to look at the mass energy debt of bending time itself. In Edge of Tomorrow, an alien called the Omega controls time. The movie treats this like evolution could produce an organism capable of warping the fabric of space-time. There is a profound hubris in suggesting that biology, the delicate dance of DNA and proteins, could somehow override the fundamental curvature of space-time. Evolution is powerful, but it still has to pay its energy bills. Space-time curvature, the bending of space and time, requires astronomical amounts of mass energy. We're talking about the kind of energy density you find near black holes or neutron stars. General relativity is clear on this. If you want to manipulate time, you need mass energy on a scale that biology simply cannot produce. To believe an organism could reset time is to believe a candle could outshine a supernova. Let's put that in perspective. To create a closed time-like curve, a theoretical path through space-time that loops back on itself, you would need exotic matter with negative energy density. We've never observed exotic matter in nature. Even if it exists, the energy requirements to stabilize a time loop would exceed anything a biological organism could generate. We're not talking about the energy output of a single creature. We're talking about energy on the scale of stellar output. Resetting Earth's timeline for even a few hours would require more energy than the Sun produces in its entire lifetime. No organism, no matter how advanced, has that kind of power. The movie also implies that the Omega can send information backward in time, that future knowledge can influence past events without violating causality. That's impossible. Information cannot travel faster than light, and it cannot travel backward in time. Relativity forbids it. Cause must precede effect. If you could send a signal to the past, you'd create paradoxes that have no resolution in known physics. You could prevent the conditions that caused the signal in the first place. The universe doesn't allow that kind of logical contradiction. There's another problem that breaks the entire concept of a synchronized reset. We all assume that now is happening everywhere at once, that if time resets on Earth, it resets everywhere. But Einstein's greatest insight proves that now is actually a personal illusion. Relativity tells us that now is different for every observer. Time is not a universal constant, it's frame-dependent. What counts as simultaneous for one observer is not simultaneous for another. A global synchronized reset, where every point on Earth jumps back to the same moment, is a physics nightmare. You'd need to define a preferred reference frame for the entire planet, which violates the principle of relativity. The movie treats time like a single timeline everyone shares. That's not how space-time works. If you're the kind of person who values this kind of clarity over Hollywood hype, you're exactly why I started Spaceverum. Hit the subscribe button and join a community that actually cares about how the universe works. If the universe can't even agree on when now is, how is a biological brain supposed to keep track of it? This brings us to the consciousness problem. The movie assumes that when time resets, the protagonist's memories transfer to his past self. The movie treats memory like a superpower, but in a real physical reset, your consciousness would be a ghost. You'd be carrying information that has no physical cause in the current timeline. You'd be a biological paradox, living in a world that, according to every law of causality, has never met you before. Let's be clear about what memory actually is. It's a physical state of neurons in your brain. Memory is encoded in synaptic connections, in the strength of neural pathways, in the chemical gradients across cell membranes. For your future memories to exist in your past brain, that information would need to travel backward in time. There is no mechanism for that. No biological process can broadcast neural data across timelines. Information would need to violate causality, which we've already established is impossible. Even if you somehow copied your brain state and transmitted it to the past, you'd run into the determinism problem. The protagonist eventually masters the loop because he treats the universe like a predictable puzzle. But at the smallest scales of reality, the universe is actually rolling dice behind your back, and it's cheating. Chaos theory says identical starting conditions diverge due to sensitivity. Quantum mechanics goes further. Even if you could recreate the exact starting conditions, the outcome would still change. That's not how quantum mechanics works. The universe is fundamentally probabilistic, not deterministic. Quantum fluctuations ensure that identical starting conditions do not produce identical outcomes. Particles exist in superpositions. Measurements collapse wave functions in ways that are inherently random. You can't master a system when the rules change every time you play. Does the idea of a fundamentally random universe bother you, or do you find it liberating? Let me know in the comments. I want to see where the Spaceverum community stands on the death of determinism. The reality is, we should be grateful time doesn't loop. Time loops require us to ignore entropy, causality, and energy conservation, 3 pillars of modern physics. A universe where time could loop backward would be a universe where logic itself fails. Causes wouldn't precede effects. Information could create paradoxes. The past could overwrite the future in ways that make prediction impossible. The one-way arrow of time is what allows the universe to be comprehensible. So here's what Edge of Tomorrow gets wrong on a deeper level. Tom Cruise doesn't just get infinite retrieves. He gets a universe where nothing matters. The universe doesn't have a save state to reload, and we should be grateful for that. A universe with a reset button is a universe where nothing is precious. A sunset, a discovery, a final breath. These things only have weight because they are final. The arrow of time isn't a prison. It's what makes your life a story instead of a loop. The appeal of do-overs is understandable. Who wouldn't want a second chance? But physics doesn't care about narrative convenience. The laws that prevent time loops are the same laws that allow stars to burn, chemistry to function, and life to exist. Hollywood sells you the fantasy of infinite to retries because it's emotionally satisfying. But the truth is more interesting than the hype. If you're the kind of person who values clarity over Hollywood shortcuts, you're exactly why Spaceverum exists. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that doesn't settle for easy answers. We debunk the myths, we honor the science, and we don't do do-overs. We just do the facts.